Hello, welcome back to Snugglewood, young Dreamlynx. My name is Arine. Snuggle down into your coziest quilt and let tonight's calming tale and soothing sounds relieve you of any worries and guide you towards a deep, restful night's sleep under these beautiful stars above. And so our story begins in a place called Kindheart Meadows, and the sleepy giant tale of peaceful pines. The peaceful pines forest was a world all of its own, ancient and undisturbed, tucked away from the communities dotted around Snugglewood. Towering trees stood watch, their branches outstretched as though whispering secrets to the skies above. Between their massive roots lay a quilt of moss, soft and inviting, intertwined with vibrant patches of ferns and flowering plants that added splashes of colour to the landscape. Streams meandered throughout the forest, their clear waters reflecting the golden sunlight that filtered through the canopy. Deep within this untouched expanse of greenery lived a giant, a presence so intertwined with the land that it felt less like a visitor and more like its guardian. The sleepy giant, as it was called, was said to slumber among the tallest of the trees at the heart of the forest. Legends passed down through generations spoke of its immense size, so vast that the mounds of its resting form blended seamlessly with the forest. A ridge of stones on its back resembled a rocky outcrop, while lush moss blanketed its form like a living artwork. It was said that the giant exuded an aura of peace, emanating a presence that lulled both the forest and its inhabitants into a tranquil equilibrium. Time in peaceful pines seemed to move differently, slower, yet infinitely purposeful. The seasons flowed in harmony, from the stunning blossoms of spring to the crisp golden leaves of autumn. No harsh storms disturbed this place. Every change held a rhythm, a balance, sustained by the unseen influence of the sleepy giant. Its presence was a quiet watchfulness, a steady force that ensured the natural order remained unbroken. Creatures of all kinds thrived in this haven. Deer grazed freely in meadows, their movements slow and deliberate, as though drawn into the serene tempo of the forest. Birds with colourful plumage flitted between trees and called softly in unison, as if their melodies were an extension of the symphony around them. Occasionally, the forest floor would come alive with the scuttling of rabbits or the quiet rustling of foxes, their antics pleasant and unobtrusive. There was something enchanting about the quiet corners of peaceful pines, specifically those nearest to the giant's resting place. In one such hidden glade, shafts of golden light pierced the canopy, illuminating a small pond. Aquatic plants traced lazy circles on its surface, carried by an almost imperceptible ripple. Near the edge, turtles basked on rocks, soaking in the warmth of the sun. It was here that the air seemed heaviest with tranquillity, thick enough to calm the most restless of souls. Beyond the visual beauty of the forest, there was a sense of interconnectedness that defined its every aspect. The splendour of the old pines with the rich loam of the forest floor, the persistent chatter of the stream harmonizing with the sighing breezes. All were manifestations of a delicate, symbiotic balance. And though the source of this harmony was rarely acknowledged outright, there was an unspoken understanding that it was the sleepy giant who preserved it all. Over the decades, stories of the giant remained myths for most, but truths for a select few adventurers or lost travellers. Those who stumbled upon the heart of peaceful pines often reported an indescribable stillness in the air, one that seemed to comfort and surround them. The presence of the sleepy giant was rarely visible, but always felt, like the soft rhythm of a heartbeat blending into the sounds of the forest. These individuals described returning with unexplainable clarity, a deep sense of peace that lingered long after they left. Despite its pervasive calm, the giant never revealed more than it needed, remaining both enigmatic and omnipresent. It moved with the enormity of seasons, if it moved at all, changing imperceptibly alongside the forest it guarded. The moss grew thicker on its surface over the years, and the great pines around it stretched higher, circling its resting place like a towering cathedral. Rain would occasionally sweep through peaceful pines, light and nourishing, sprinkling life over the canopy and the flora below. Within these moments, one could feel the passive power of the giant, like the forest was holding its breath, heeding the ebb of nature's pulse. The rainwater would pool in the ridges of the giant's form, trickling down into newly formed streams that joined others to create a rich, flowing network of life. Everything about the forest seemed cyclical, infused with the steadying influence of its silent overseer. At night, the forest transformed further under the soft glow of starlight and the pale reflection of the moon. The canopy softened the starkness of the dark, casting the woods in muted shadows. Fireflies gathered in clusters, their light dancing intermittently, as if performing for the towering keeper, hidden in the heart of it all. The hush, palpable during the day, deepened into something intangible, defying the passage of time. Even in sleep, the forest held its perpetual rhythm. It was said that in rare moments, the sleepy giant stirred. Ripples of its movement became visible across peaceful pines. The soft sway of the trees, or the trembling of the ground beneath one's feet, were signs that the giant had adjusted its position, settling more comfortably into its long slumber. These movements, infrequent as they were, evoked awe rather than fear, as if to remind the forest and its inhabitants of the vigilant force that dwelled within. Years blended into decades, and decades into centuries. But the essence of the peaceful pines remained untouched. Travellers who approached the edges of the forest might sense an inexplicable sense of yearning, a pull towards the unseen sanctuary. Those who passed through carried with them a feeling of wonder, as though peaceful pines and its mysterious guardian left an indelible mark on the soul. The sleepy giant remained, settled in its forever rest, holding vigil over the harmonious existence of the forest it had watched over for countless ages. Its presence filled peaceful pines with a stillness that was neither empty nor fragile, but full of life, of balance, of the perpetuity of nature itself. The sleepy giant's silent watch over the forest was as dependable as the dawn that filtered through the trees each day. Generations of animals made their homes under its canopy, from busy squirrels scurrying along branches to delicate deer grazing in moonlit clearings. Time seemed to flow differently within the bounds of peaceful pines, measured not by clocks or calendars, but by the rhythm of season and cycle. Day gave way to night, winter melted into spring, and the world continued in balance, as though the sleepy giant's very presence ensured an eternal harmony. It was said by those who believed in such things that the forest itself was alive because of the energy radiating from the giant's resting form. Birds would often weave intricate nests in the curved nook of its shoulders, as if drawn there by an unseen warmth. Streams that meandered lazily past the giant's feet sparkled clearer than any water one might find elsewhere, as though purified by proximity. Even the towering trees seemed to bow their branches, when the wind carried whispers to and from the immovable form of their guardian. Despite the sense of tranquility, there always lingered a quiet curiosity about the sleepy giant. No one knew why it had chosen to rest in peaceful pines, only that it did so long before anyone could remember. The surface of the giant's massive form was weathered, blending perfectly with the earth around it, as if to remind those who stumbled upon it that it belonged wholly to the land itself. Moss covered its massive arms, a tapestry of green that flourished under the dappled sunlight. Wildflowers in hues of vibrant yellow and soft blues bloomed around its wrists and ankles, forming natural wreaths that added to its quiet majesty. There were stories, of course, tales passed down through whispers on quiet evenings, by firesides or from hikers on sunlit trails. Some said the giant was born from the earth itself, a spirit of the mountains that came to rest here after millennia of wandering. Others believed it was once a guardian of the skies, who had descended to safeguard the forest below. A particularly charming legend told of how the giant had been tasked by the stars to protect a secret far below the forest's soil, and had vowed never to rise again until the world had forgotten that secret entirely. But not all stories were spoken aloud. Some were written by the forest itself in the chapters of its every rock, tree, and creature. The deep carvings of age on the giant's stone-like skin seemed to hold their own tale. When the moonlight struck just right, lines and grooves often appeared to form symbols that no one could truly decipher, but left many sure that the giant carried its history etched into its very being. And so the forest sang its own tale of life, weaving creatures and seasons into its melody, with the sleepy giant as its unchanging refrain. One afternoon, under a sky brushed with soft clouds, a young fox crept tentatively toward the sleepy giant. It had lived its whole life within the boundaries of peaceful pines, but had never dared approach its mythic guardian until now. The fox stopped just shy of the moss-covered hand that lay like a fallen boulder nestled in the roots. Tilting its head, it observed the giant with cautious curiosity. It tapped at a stray leaf resting on the hand's surface with its paw, and quickly darted back. Nothing happened. The giant remained still, as always. Encouraged, the fox ventured closer and sniffed the earthy scent of moss. Here, closer than it had ever been to the legend, it felt a peculiar sense of comfort, as though no harm could possibly touch it under the shadow of this presence. Even when the winds stirred the tall grasses around them and sent a whisper through the leaves, the fox felt no urge to flee. It stayed there all afternoon, curled up in the shade of one colossal finger, before trotting back towards its den, just as dusk crept in. This quiet moment of connection seemed to ripple through the forest, sparking similar intrigue among its many residents. A chattering jay alighted on the giant's knee a week later, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon, seemingly unaware of the possibility of finding a perch upon such ancient company. A family of raccoons began nesting near the broad curve of the giant's leg, rummaging happily in the leaf litter below. Even the river otters, typically far from this part of the woods, began splashing playfully in the waters that encircled the base of its resting form, as if celebrating the guardian's presence in ways they could understand. Not only animals, but also travellers found themselves drawn to this quiet marvel. It wasn't long before Dreamlynx visitors brought their own sense of wonder. Some came by intent, having heard stories of the great giant that slumbered in perpetual solace. Others stumbled upon the peaceful clearing as if guided by invisible hands. All of them left with memories and a strange, quiet awareness of something bigger than themselves. A profound connection to the very heart of the forest. Peaceful Pines, however, had no intention of becoming anything less than its name implied. The few travellers who lingered always treated the giant with reverence, knowing the unspoken rule of this magic place. The forest, as if understanding their respect, welcomed them gently. Campsites formed beneath unbroken canopies, and laughter of families sometimes merged with the humming of bees. There was a spirit of preservation here that ensured peaceful pines stayed as untouched and pure as it had been in the endless company of its guardian. It was on one of these peaceful evenings, with firelight flickering just beyond the horizon of the forest, that change began to stir. A trail of clouds moved across the moon, scattering shadows that danced among the trees. It wasn't a threatening shift, nor was there any sound to mark its arrival. Yet the forest itself seemed to hush. Birds nestled deeper into their boughs. Leaves turned slightly as if catching their breath. One by one, animals drew themselves inward, watching the horizon with cautious eyes. Though there were no new visitors on the land, no commotion to explain this instinctual response. At the heart of the forest, close to the resting form of the giant, the wind moved differently, circling slower than usual. For hours it seemed the world was waiting. But for what? Not even the forest could say. The orchestration of silence deepened until dawn broke over the tops of the trees, painting everything with golden light. Slowly, Peaceful Pines exhaled its held breath as new warmth wrapped the world. Whatever it was that had unsettled them had passed, leaving no trace but a small sense that the giant's watch, though unbroken, might have turned its attention inward, dwelling on something no one else could perceive. Perhaps the wind carried a truth known only to the roots beneath, or the stars above. But anyone gazing upon the sleepy giant that day might have noticed the slightest glint of life under the blanket of time, worn heavy on its surface. For a fleeting moment, the light scattered across the forest. Families continued to dwell and visitors continued to come, their steps lighter from the awareness of this shared magic. The change was subtle, yet undeniable. Those who lingered near the sleepy giant began to notice other peculiarities. A mellow sound on the breeze, a warmth in the sunlight that felt less like fire and more like an affectionate touch. The forest, already vibrant, seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the quiet, peaceful energy of the giant. Leaves rustled in a language older than words, as though sharing forgotten secrets with anyone willing to listen. Little giants were often the first to sense the change. Their laughter now seemed to echo louder in the clearing, as if the land itself was responding, harmonizing with their joy. They would pick wild flowers and leave them near the giant's roots, forming colourful, ephemeral offerings that seemed to brighten the forest floor. The little giant's parents, though sceptical at first, couldn't help but notice how their little ones returned home more content, their eyes filled with wonder, their sleep undisturbed. One little giant named Leo, visiting with his family, sat at the base of the giant's trunk one sunny afternoon. Unlike his usual energetic self, he was unusually calm, as though cradled by a beautiful presence. He pulled some drawing paper from his bag and began sketching. What emerged on his page was not the sprawling pine forest or the majestic sleepy giant as it was known to the Dreamlynx eye. Instead, his drawing captured something deeper, a nebulous, glowing aura that oozed warmth and tranquility, flowing from the earth and around the giant's form. He coloured the scene with shades of soft golden light, blending into a soothing green. When asked about it later, he simply shrugged and said, "This is what it feels like." Word of the forest's peculiar magic began to spread quietly. While no one could quite explain it, people ventured farther to experience it for themselves. Travellers seeking solace came to the grove, often bearing burdens too heavy for words. They wouldn't find solutions within the forest. Life's trials remained. But somehow they left lighter, as if the weight had shifted just enough to make it manageable. One visitor in particular, an artist burdened by a creative block, spent hours sketching the sleepy giant, finding himself wholly consumed by the atmosphere. His pencil danced freely across the pages, as though guided by creative hands. He drew not only the forest, but the emotions it invoked. Lines that carried the serenity of sunbeams breaking through the canopy, the stillness of moss-coated rocks, and the lightest, timeless smile made by the curves of the giant's worn surface. Long after he left, his pieces became celebrated works of art, their mere presence evoking the same unnameable calm as the forest itself. Mornings in the peaceful pines began to take on an enchanted air. Mist would cling softly to the hills, pooling in the hollows like perfectly smooth material draped across the land. Birdsongs carried a tender tune in the early hours, mixing with the rustling of awakening branches. Those who visited learned to rise early, swaddled in their quilts to sit near the forest edges and drink in this particular kind of quiet. It was not the silence of absence, but the quiet of presence, a stillness rich with the buzz of life. At night, the peaceful pines offered a different kind of magic. The stars above shimmered through the towering trees, their light dancing across the forest floor. A soft breeze would weave through the pines, carrying with it the hollow whispers of the woods. The sounds of nocturnal creatures stirred gently in the distance, a lullaby crafted by nature itself. Sleep came effortlessly here, as if the forest wove dreams from its very essence, wrapping each visitor in a cocoon of serenity and rest. When morning returned, the first light spilled over the treetops. The peaceful pines would exhale a beautiful warmth bidding farewell to those who needed to depart. For those who stayed, the forest would greet them anew, a reminder that peace and renewal could always be found amongst the trees. Visitors carried its memory with them, the echoes of its quiet presence, a balm for even the busiest of days. And so, the peaceful pines remained. Not just a forest, but a promise of tranquility. Always waiting, always welcoming.